Welcome to the Atomic Mommy Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Pangaro, and every week I talk to special guests about everything parenting to help you on your parenting journey. Be sure to like and subscribe this podcast so you can get notified whenever I publish a new episode. Now let's get to it. Today's special guest is Angie Grandt. She's an adoption coach using powerful tools like quantum human design, mindset coaching, and behavior change tools to help adoptive and foster parents struggling with behaviors to not only tap into their unique gifts as a parent, but to also really see and support their child to be their authentic self. Be sure to join Angie on her podcast, Sometimes Love Isn't Enough, as she shares vulnerable stories and practical tools to help you shift your most important relationships. Hi, Angie. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me and to talk about this very unique topic, a topic I've actually never covered before on the show. I'm going to let you introduce the topic since you're the expert. So go ahead, tell me about it.
Yeah, hi. So thank you so much for having me here. I'm Angie Grandt, and so I'm an adoption coach. And what that essentially means, I'm also an adoptive parent, a former foster parent, but I know that adoptive parents or parents raising kids who have experienced disrupted attachment face unique challenges. And so I use mindset coaching, and now I'm pulling human design into what I'm doing with the parents that I serve to help them show up different and to really handle behaviors in maybe a different way than maybe they've been trained to.
Oh, I mean, that's amazing. That's amazing what you do. So I'm a mom of four in the natural sense, so not an adoptive or a foster parent. And so I've never really, I can't relate really to other parents who are adoptive or fostering. I don't know what kind of struggles they go through, parenting issues, connection issues. Why don't we talk about that? Let me know what it's like to be a parent as an adoptive parent or a fostering parent.
Yeah. So when we decide to be a foster parent or to be an adoptive parent, we're deciding to bring somebody else's child into our own home. But science tells us, research tells us that that time that a baby spends in the womb, they're building attachments. They're building a connection with the hormones of their biomom, with the sounds that they hear, with the environment that they're in. We know that there's already a connection. And so even in the best of circumstances, when, in the best of circumstances, when biomom, for example, is able to get great prenatal care, when the foster or adoptive family is able to connect with her and be right there at the hospital and love that child from day one, even in those circumstances, there's a lot of evidence to show that that attachment piece can be really disrupted. And also, there's a lot of talk recently about how just the separation itself really can be traumatic for the child, even in the best of circumstances. And so what that ends up looking like to a lot of parents is this child who we love so much and we've put so much effort into bringing them into our home. And we see some really sometimes unsettling behaviors that are designed to test whether or not we'll keep them forever. So, man, I don't know if I want to go into details of some of the behaviors necessarily, but I definitely, just because I want to be so protective of my son actually and his experience.
I understand.
But I know as mom and other moms that I've connected with that, we're trying so hard to love our kids, but it's as if they keep engaging in behaviors to push us away, to test us.
To sort of see if you'll stay, in other words.
Yeah.
So I get that.
Yeah.
I understand that sensation of wanting to, make sure the connection that you now have with your adoptive or foster parent is real and is long lasting. I can understand that feeling. So I know you want to protect your son because, you don't want to share all the behaviors, but maybe give us an example of what a behavior could look like if they're trying to push you away.
Yeah. So often what is experienced by adoptive or foster parents is that you'll have this child who will be loving and attentive and so sweet. And you'll feel like, oh, wow, this is really working. They're really bonding with me. They're really connecting with me. And this can happen from, toddlerhood up on through adolescence and teenage years. Whereas parents, we can feel like, wow, I'm feeling this is going well. I'm doing all the right things. And then suddenly out of the blue, our kids will do something. And it could be things like stealing or lying or creating stories about us, maybe telling authorities that we did something we didn't do, or doing something to hurt maybe one of their siblings or the family pet. But, or man, like so many different things. But they're things that I know that sometimes other parents who haven't adopted can relate with some of the behaviors, but what ends up happening is that it's this like almost unpredictable up and down where it's like the child gets really close and then after a while it does seem predictable, right? Like you can see like, oh, we're getting close. I wonder when the shoe's going to drop this time. And as parents who are trying so hard to love, it's quite an emotional roller coaster.
I mean, I can relate on one aspect. And it's probably not 100% obviously, because it's a very different situation, different type of parenting. But I do have one daughter who is 16 now, and her father and I divorced when she was like 9.5 months old. So he's never really been in the picture in the terms of like a traditional family unit, right? And because of that situation, we both co-parent 50-50, 1 week on, 1 week off. And she's always been the one out of the two of them, because she has an older sister, who has always tested. So we'll have that period of time where things are going great. Things are wonderful. I'm giving her love. She's accepting. She's returning the love. We're in a great dynamic. And then, like you said, the shoe just drops and behaviors start to test whether or not I'm going to be there and I'm going to stick around or am I going to leave? And also she does the same thing to her father. And so it becomes very difficult to keep that bond going. And then to try to bring it back or to try to renew the bond, it's very difficult. So I can relate on, a small portion of it. So it's interesting that you say that. So keep going. I want to know more.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting as you share that story too, Kim, because oftentimes I also have a podcast. And one of the things that I talk about a lot is that attachment doesn't just happen when a child is relinquished. Attachment disruptions can happen during divorce. They can happen when a baby has experienced time in the NICU or being hospitalized when they're young. It really, when during those first 2 years of life are crucial for kids to develop a strong attachment. And so when things happen, big things happen, like a change in placement or custody, like you described, even in the best of circumstances, it can be really hard for some kids to handle. And that's actually why I've been learning more about human design. I don't think we'll have enough time in this episode to talk about that, but I'm learning so much more about how our kids are so uniquely designed. And so some kids can handle changes like that a little bit better. And some kids really struggle with changes like a divorce, like an adoption, like being placed in foster care. And yeah, so the one thing that I guess I would say is rather unique to foster and adoptive parents is oftentimes when we're seeing these unsettling behaviors, like you had described about your daughter, like she'll get close and then something happens to kind of like test you, right? I think the difference that kind of happens over time, but maybe you experience this too, is that I know for myself, I started to question whether or not our relationship was ever really real, like whether or not, like I was pouring all of myself into loving my son and not getting that return. And it started to feel after a while, after years, that perhaps when he was being so connected with me, maybe that part wasn't real. And maybe he was just trying to figure out life. But, so as mom, when, like I said, to go through becoming a foster parent or go through adoption, it's a hard process. I know for some biological parents, conceiving can be really hard too. But I feel like we pour so much of ourselves into trying to love these kids who we know come from tricky places without return, without that love back, which over time can just be really hard. And then many of the behaviors that we experience can be scary too. So then we have this child we're raising who's experienced trauma. And then we ourselves as parents end up in this kind of trauma loop where we become afraid of our kids, afraid of their behaviors, afraid of what might happen to us or to our other kids or to the kids at school or to our adopted kiddos.
You know, it's a very tricky thing, because I know there are parents who do go through that situation, even with their own children. You know, they gave birth to them. I'm going through it now, like I said, with my 16-year-old. I feel like I'm in a trauma loop with her sometimes, where it never ends. It feels like we get to this good place, everything goes great, and then a change happens. It could be something so small, something that I had nothing to do with. The change just happened, you know. And I'll give you an example where last August, actually, her uncle died on her father's side, and they were all close. And it triggered her into like this recurring loop of anger and resentment. But it felt like she was placing it on me, even though I had nothing to do with the situation. It just felt like she placed it in my direction, and like she grew closer to her father. And at first I felt like, what did I do wrong? What could I do to possibly help her? And it was like constant, but I didn't know what to do, and I was struggling with it. And I know she was struggling with it, because I know that we were close and then we got unclose because of it. And so what do you tell parents? Because I know adoptive and foster parents definitely have to go through this. How do you help them get through those things that they have no control over, that trigger the kids into this trauma loop, like you say? What do you do with that?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So when I work with parents, it's twofold. Part of it is helping parents to shift their mindset, because our kids are just our kids, right? And they're going through their own life experience. But oftentimes, as I was describing about my own son, I was taking it so personal, as most parents do, right? I was taking it so personal about what he was going through and what he was showing to me. And at first, the first several years, I could be more neutral in the situation and just remind myself, like, he's been through trauma, he's been through hard things. But over time, like you said, it becomes this loop that we're stuck in. And so on the one end, I really work with my clients on their mindset. And so use really key mindset tools to help them shift the way that they're thinking about the situation, because it is our thoughts that create our feelings. So when we're feeling like we're in this trauma loop, it's because of the thoughts that we have. For example, like I had thoughts about my son that I had this fear of what his future was going to look like because of the behaviors that I saw when he was young, and I didn't want to have those thoughts, but these were thoughts that were running through my head, like, oh my gosh, he's breaking this law now at 10 years old. How is he ever going to successfully move out of the house, get a job, hold a relationship? I was jumping to that because that's what we do as parents.
Yeah,
but we all do. Thoughts. Yeah. But it was those thoughts that I had that I didn't know I had control over. But it was those thoughts that created my feelings of like this like devastation and then fear. And that's what got me stuck in the loop, actually, was my own thoughts about what might happen to him. So I work with my clients on that piece. But then I also work with them on responding to their child's needs instead of reacting to whatever the behavior is. Because we know when our kids are behaving in a way that doesn't match kind of their norm, like you describing about your daughter, that wasn't her norm to be so angry at you.
No, yeah.
We know when our kids are misbehaving that it is a very clear reflection of what's going on inside of them. But as parents, we have these behaviors right in front of us. So we react to those and give however we react to them, whether we get angry back at them or we give them consequences or we maybe withhold our love. We do all kinds of things. But we as parents aren't really trained and aren't really great at responding to what they actually need. When you were saying like you were trying to figure out what was going on with her. But I know for myself, at least, even though I knew and I was trying to understand my son, when I look back, I also know that my behavior changed towards him. Like I put up my own wall. It's hard to keep giving so much love and almost getting spit back at.
Yeah, I
figuratively,
get that.
literally. Take that how you want. But
You put your wall up to protect yourself. I think that's, natural human instinct, right?
Yeah. Which is exactly where our kids are. These kids who've experienced trauma, they have this huge, strong wall up. And sometimes, I was saying like they'll get, you'll feel a little close. It's like they like peek over the wall, like, does anybody out there love me? And then they're like, oh, I'm afraid. Then they put that wall back up, but it happens to us too.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of the other big piece of what I do is helping parents to really respond to what their kids need. And so, I often share this example. There was this client that I was working with. She, her child is a little bit younger. Maybe she was like 7, but she was really struggling with that attachment piece, which then looked like a lot of really challenging behaviors. And the behaviors lead the people in her life to not like her. Like she's kind of annoying to be around because she's constantly engaging in behaviors. So I worked with the parents to, instead of trying to teach her, like, you can't hit your brother or you can't do this or you can't do that, right? That's how we all react to what's happening. I worked with the parents to train themselves when their child is doing whatever. They're chasing the dog around or they're beating up their brother or they're, dumping shampoo all over the bathroom. I work with the parents to train themselves to say, what does my child actually need right now? Because she doesn't need you to tell her that she shouldn't do that. She doesn't need you to tell her she's going to hurt her brother. She doesn't need all of these words from you. Chances are she's acting that way because she feels maybe a little bit unlovable or uncertain, or her wall is going up a little bit. And so what can you do to help her feel okay with maybe bringing that wall down in that moment? Which is hard as parents to train ourselves to do that because the behaviors are screaming at us.
Yeah. It's almost like we're in reaction mode all the time versus, taking a nanosecond to just step back and say, okay, let me not react immediately. Let me think, why is she doing this? And let me ask. So it's a difficult behavior to change in parents. It's not something that's super simple. I know for myself, I definitely cannot change. Like, I have tried so hard. And I think that might be a product of how I was raised and how my parents were raised, that when a negative behavior is coming from our kids, we, immediately like, don't do that. You can't do this because X, Y, and Z will happen. Instead of trying to listen to why they were doing it in the first place. It's a very, very difficult behavior to break. I will say that. I can admit that.
Yeah. Well, that's why that mindset piece, like as parents, we have to work on our mindset. And I also would add on to that, not only do we have to work on our mindset, the way that we're thinking about their behaviors, but we also have to make sure our own cup is full too, or overflowing. The coach I'm working with right now, she says, like, don't just fill your cup, make sure your own cup is overflowing, because if your cup is full and then you give to your kids who need you, well, now your cup's empty again. Yeah. Why not make sure your own personal cup is overflowing so that you have plenty to give? Because when our cup is empty, we're just, like you said, we're in this like reaction mode because we're so stressed out. Well, of course we're going to blow up at our kids, even if our blowing up isn't yelling at them. Like I rarely got to the point of yelling at my son, because in my heart, I knew he experienced trauma and that yelling was like the worst possible thing I could do to him. But instead, I kind of went the opposite way, where he was misbehaving and I would just put up my wall and be a little bit more withdrawn with him. But it's the same thing, right? I was still reacting to his behaviors in a way that reinforced what he was worried about, right? It reinforced, like, maybe I'm not lovable because I did this thing and now mom's pulling away a little bit. And it's the same, right?
Yeah.
Or put up a wall. It's
a cycle. It is a cycle. I just had a thought about that actually, because our own traumas, regardless of when or how they happen, they also play a role in how we give our love and our attention and how we sort of go about parenting. So you talking about overflowing our cup. We struggle with that as parents, figuring out what our cup even needs. And I think more than just mindset, it's also trying to figure out, what do we need that will allow us to overfill our cup so then we can be present for our kids?
100%.
Do you find that that's true?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, yes. And to me, it all goes back to mindset because like you said, we're trained as parents to almost be a martyr, right? Like we're conditioned. We watch others like, you know, don't take care of yourself because your kids need you first. Good moms are at all the things for their kids and doing all the things for their kids, and now following all the social media things for your kids. And it's almost like if we're doing things to take care of ourselves, that it's perceived as being selfish.
Yeah, it's true, honestly. So I'll give you an example, a very personal one. My parents are not from this country. So they're both immigrants. They came here, when they were young themselves. They were practically teenagers when they came. And so they were parented very differently. And they gave this sense of like you have to be hard as a parent, but you also have to be very selfless. And the second that you did something for yourself, like my mother would say to me, you shouldn't be doing that for yourself. That, why are you like my husband and I, we would take like little weekends away just for me and him so we could be a couple. And she would get, almost make me feel guilty for doing it. So I definitely understand what you're saying.
Yeah. 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 And, I think it's up to us to decide that maybe that way wasn't the right way.
Yeah.
And, as we think about, we're the ones guiding this next generation of kids who are then going to guide the next generation. It's up to us to decide that, what, no, I know that I need to be the best version of myself for my kids because that's who they need me to be. And if my cup is empty, I'm going to snap at them and I'm going to yell at them and I'm going to just perpetuate the cycle of all of it.
So you talk about something, I forgot what you said it was called, human design or huma design. What was it called again?
Human design.
So what is that exactly? Because I have no idea. And how does it relate to adoptive and foster parents? And is that only unique to those categories of parents?
Oh no. So man, this is like a whole other episode.
I mean, you can give us a short description.
I will. Well, I'll try my best. So human design is a bit of it's a cutting edge personality assessment, but it's based on the chakra system, the Judaic Kabbalah, the Eastern and Western astrology, quantum physics. It's based on all of these things pulled together. And so the idea is that all of us have a very unique blueprint. You can go online. I can send you a link if you want it, but you can pull your unique design that you were born with. And the idea with human design is that when we know as parents our own blueprint about how we have our own energy, how we receive and respond to other people's energy, how we interact with those in our life. And then when we know that about our kids, about our significant others, about the people in our life that matter, when we understand better how we use energy, it has a huge impact on our ability to understand our kids, to understand our significant other. So, for example, there are so many deep layers to human design, but I'll just share kind of on a surface level, there are 5 types. And I am a type that is the majority of the world. I'm called a generator or builder. And what that means essentially is that I have the type of energy that I can work, and I love the work I do, and I work really hard. And sometimes I have a lot of projects that I'm working on. Both of my kids do not have the same energy type that I do. Both of my kids have an energy type that they're designed to see the landscape of society, but they're not designed to do the work. They're designed to see it and to share it with others. Well, so then as kids, right, doing chores was hard for them, but I didn't know that about them. I just thought that they were being lazy, for example. I never called them that. But as a parent, I'm like, why can't they just get their chores done? Like, I never had issues doing my chores when I was a kid, but they're not designed that way. Or, for example, I know that my granddaughter, her emotional center is open, which means she reflects other people's emotions, where I'm not designed that way. I have my own consistent emotions. But knowing these things about my kids, about my grandkids, has given me so much more insight about how to interact with them, how to respond to them, how to appreciate them for the gifts that they were born with. So that's kind of like a really surface level part of it. But yeah, everybody has a human design. It's, you really just need your birth date and time and location, and then you get this printout, because it is, like I said, based on astrology and the chakra system. So it gives you a printout, but it kind of requires you to work with somebody to help you understand it, because it's pretty complex.
Okay.
So, and you think about, right, so back to your question though, about how does this help adoptive parents? So I have a biological daughter and an adopted son. My biological daughter, I have connections with her. There are things that I just know about her because I gave birth to her. She was in my womb. I know her genetic history. There are so many things that I just instinctively know about her. I also learned a great deal once I pulled her human design chart, things that I kind of knew about her, but once I saw it, I was like, yeah, that's exactly who my daughter is. It's mind blowing. But with my son, I don't have that genetic bond, that womb bond with my son. And so as an adoptive parent, to be able to pull my son's chart and see who he was designed to be is really what a great tool to be able to really help see him and help encourage his strengths that maybe weren't so instinctive to me to really understand, if that makes sense.
I get it. So this is this is going to help parents and adoptive parents and foster parents, but really all parents too, to sort of understand their children and their energy, in a very unique way, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And so I've been doing some in-person workshops, kind of local to where I am. And every parent that has come to my workshop, as I'm showing them their design or showing them their kids' designs, they're like, oh my gosh, like this is where I've been missing the mark with my kids. Like they're trying to parent a child who they think is like them, but most often our kids are not like us. They have a different design than us. And so really seeing that and saying like, oh, if I, respond to their energy this way, or help them manage sleep this way, or help them manage their emotions this way, they would feel so much more aligned to who they truly are.
Well, maybe you said you do this in your area, right? What about doing a virtual workshop, like a 5-day or 10-day intensive workshop for all parents to learn this information for their kids?
Yeah. That's actually, it's on the future horizon for me. I'm in the process. I'm almost done becoming certified as a human design specialist and also as a family coach. And through my family coach certification, human design is a huge part of it. So I will be launching some things related to that as well. So I'm really excited about that.
I'm really happy for you. So I'm going to ask you this question. If you let's just say this, 5 top tips you can give adoptive and foster parents right off the top of your head, what would they be?
Ooh, 5 top tips. Let's see. Well, the first would be get a mindset coach, because it is too incredibly hard to do by yourself. The second thing I would say is when your child is misbehaving, ask yourself that question, what does my child need from me right now? Because the answer will probably not be that they need you to lecture them or yell at them or give them a consequence. Number 3 would be to find out your personal information and pull your human design chart and understand that and reach out if you need help with that. Number 4 would be pull your child's human design chart and find out about that. And let's see, I would say my number 5 tip would be to just, if you have forgotten why you adopted in the first place, if you're so stuck in the muck of the behaviors and you're stuck in this trauma loop, sit down and just take some time to journal about what led you to adoption in the first place. Because I think sometimes we get so caught up in today and worrying about tomorrow that we forget why we're here in the first place. And sometimes doing an activity like that can be really grounding and can really help reset us to then rewrite our future story. about where we want our life to be with our kiddo. Because I can tell you, when I was stuck in the muck, I was so focused on this is going to happen to my son if he doesn't change his behaviors. I had these clear visions in my head about he's going to be in prison. He's not going to have, he's not going to be able to get married. He's going to, all these things, right? Awful things that I should never have thought about my son. But based on the evidence that I thought was so clear in front of me, that's where I thought his life was going. But when I started working with a mindset coach and really shifted the way that I was thinking about that and started seeing like, you know what, no, he has these beautiful talents. Right now his wall is getting in the way and he's not tapping into his talents. And so what if I can really show up for him differently and help him see those talents and, let him be him, how that will change. And I can tell you that now. So my son is 18 now, and man, he is tapping into his talents like there's no tomorrow. It's so cool to see how he has shifted and how our relationship has shifted. And honestly, 5 years ago, if you had asked me what our relationship was going to be like in 5 years, I would have said we wouldn't have one. That it was just so strained between the two of us. And it is not at all now.
I'm very grateful that you came on the show, Angie, because I feel there are so many parents that needed to hear this specific information, because it doesn't, I know that it's specific to adoptive and foster parents, but even in my case, as a co-parent from a divorce, it's very helpful to hear this information. And it makes me want to dive into some of the information that I could be using to help reset my mind and maybe help my daughter and parent her a little bit differently, a little bit better for her, because sometimes as parents, we get stuck in our own ways and we don't step outside of that to really understand that maybe our children need a different kind of parenting. So I'm very happy that you and I got to speak and we got to share this information to other parents. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I was able to chat with you and hang out with you and share.
So, for everyone who's going to be listening, especially for the people who are in your area, tell us about how we find you on the internet. How do we sit with you, meet with you, where you're located in, like the region that you serve. So this way we can sort of connect with you and try to get ourselves on this new mindset path.
Yeah. So my business name is Connected Parents with Angie. So that's my website, connectedparentswithangie.com. That's where I'm on Instagram, Facebook. So that's probably the easiest way to find me. If you are ready to take that next step, maybe look into human design, or you want to book a consult, go to my website, connectedparentswithangie.com. I'm not great at keeping my website updated, but at least there's a link on there to book. I promise that that works, but websiting is not my jam. So that's where you can find me. I also have a podcast called Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. So you can listen there. And then I am in southern Wisconsin. So if you are in the Janesville, Wisconsin area, I do a monthly workshop in the area. So stop on by and you can connect with me in any of those ways. I post about it on Facebook and Instagram and all the fun things. So yeah, that's where to find me.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest on my show. And for all of our listeners, you are now talking with Angie, and you can reach her on her website and to book a session with her. So thank you so much, Angie. I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much too.
And that's the end of the episode. Thanks for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe so you can be notified whenever I publish a new episode.